Russ?
Hello?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's true.
We could turn the closed captions on.
Not everything says that on my end for him.
Yeah, everything on our end is working and everybody else can hear us except, oh God, it's not up. Everybody else can hear us except for you, so I think it has to be on your end. Like all the other people attending.
I
Do you wanna
heard
leave?
it fine when I was, before I became a panelist, when I just joined the webinar.
You can try unplugging his headphones.
I'm gonna come back to the phone.
Pick up your phone.
Come back to your phone.
What's that?
Do you wanna try leaving and coming back and see if that helps? Okay, bye. This is being recorded, so this is fun.
Should we get started?
Yeah, we can get started, right? Can we? Okay. Call the meeting to order at 6:02. We would like to acknowledge that we gather on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically Nooksack and Lummi tribes, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. On behalf of everyone here, we want to express our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Nooksack and Lummi tribes, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any changes to the agenda? No? Nick?
Right. Let's see. Share my screen here.
Oh wait, do we have any changes
Oh,
to the
no.
agenda?
Sorry, no.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Motion to approve agenda is written.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, good with the order.
Alright. Okey doke. Good to the order. We got the FFA Ag Mechanics team to the National Convention. So congrats to those folks heading over and good luck to them and go Baker. Should be fun to hear how they do. I know they've been working hard and looking forward to it. So thanks to everyone that's helping support them as well. Just a reminder about our drama, our play that's going on, Revolting Teens of the Sherwood. I think there's a preview tomorrow for our students on campus. They're gonna get a chance to check it out. Yeah, and then those are some shows that you guys are able to attend and should be a good show. I know they've been working hard on it. And the Acme boiler has been installed. That's a pretty big celebration, especially given our real recent temperatures. There's a couple safety pieces that are gonna be installed before it is fully up and functioning, but Tom shared with us that he's able to see a flame in it, and the flame was going for a little while. So we're real happy to have that up and going. So
Awesome.
that's what we got for good of the order.
Cool. All right, consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, information from the audience. Did anybody sign up to?
So is Russ able to hear us now?
Can you hear us, Russ?
Yeah.
All right, Jen Stevens?
I have a stick right here.
Whatever you'd like, yeah.
Sorry, I was really quick. My name is Jen Stevens. I've been at Mount Baker for nearly 20 years at both the junior high and high school levels. I'm primarily an 8th through 11th grade English teacher, but I have taught over 15 different kinds of classes, ranging from 7th grade art to college readiness. Given my range of experience, I get to see students in a variety of capacities while they are on campus. As a teacher, I create logical units of study. I make informed decisions using state standards to guide my choices, and I'm transparent in what I do. All my stakeholders, my students, parents, support teachers, principals, they all have access to all parts of my teaching. My inclination is to quietly do my work, but while I was doing that, something had gone drastically wrong with our budget. Somehow, and I really don't know how, we are now in a situation where there is no transparency, no logical next steps, and as far as I know, no informed decisions on how we will solve this budget crisis. I am here today because I am worried. I am worried that all of our students, from our most marginalized students to our most high achieving, will suffer because of decisions that are not driven by informed process. This was clear to anyone on campus last year with how our secretaries were treated during the RIF process. Because there was no communication in that case, I have grave concerns about how the leadership is navigating the latest budget crisis. Could that heartache and loss have been avoided if there had been a solid plan in place? I am worried because the decision to not replace the assistant principal has real consequences that I don't believe were considered. The ineffective plan to have district office admin does not replace the need for our most at-risk students to build relationships with caring leadership. Our principals, Matt and Troy, are amazing, but they're running ragged. However, other full-time admin might view their day job as just a lunch duty or hall monitor, but it is bigger than that. Some recent graduates crossed that finish line because of the dedication of people like Andy, who talked them through their life choices time and again. Could that position have been saved if there had been a solid plan in place? I am worried about the colleagues with decades of valuable teaching experience here at Mount Baker will lose their job and look elsewhere because of a lack of logical, informed, and transparent leadership. This is a huge loss for our students. Could their jobs be saved if a solid plan was in place? Every teacher on this campus creates logical lessons, makes informed teaching decisions, and is transparent to their stakeholders. My hope is that this governing body will adopt a process and hold themselves to those same standards. My beloved Mount Baker colleagues, students, and families deserve this. Time is of the essence. Thank you.
Meg Lee?
Hi, my name is Meg Lee, and I'm a counselor at the high school. I first started working at Mount Baker in 2004 as a volunteer, helping translate and tutor for our Russian and Ukrainian students. Within a year, I became a paraeducator, and within 2 years, I was parked behind a rolly cart in the back of Toby Marston's office as his counseling intern. That was 15 years ago, and I am still in Toby's office every single day, despite the fact that my own office is directly next door. Mount Baker is the only district I have ever worked for, and I would prefer to keep it that way. During the course of my career here at Baker, I've had many special assignments that I am very proud of. Several years ago, I was the designated counselor for our Compass Alternative program. I teach lessons in 9th grade health class on stress and anxiety, and I teach our school-wide suicide prevention curriculum every year. I also now teach comprehensive sexual health education to our 11th graders. I am the team lead for our 9th grade success grant, and I serve on the advisory committee for the planning and development of our school-based health center. Anyone who knows me knows that I am a team player. I could not sustain the work I do as a counselor without the strength, bravery, and optimism of the people that support me every day. In light of this fact, it is much easier for me to utilize my time with you this evening talking about my team as opposed to myself. And please be warned, my team is not doing very well. Last spring, I watched my principal hold back tears at a staff meeting when he had to announce the impending cut of multiple staff without any clear information about where the cuts might take place or how the decision-making process would play out. Last spring, I watched as my assistant principal kindly and empathetically spoke with every one of the secondary secretarial staff about the potential of them losing their jobs without the ability to provide any reassurance as to the district's procedure, timeline, or plan. Last spring, I worked with Toby Marston, who spent well over 40 hours trying to build a master schedule without actually knowing how our secondary campus would be staffed. Last spring, I walked into the main office one morning to find every single one of our secretaries beside themselves with fear, humiliation, and horror as they literally watched their colleagues take their jobs away from them in what can only be described as the Hunger Games of classified job reassignment. Over the course of the past 6 months, I've been in at least a half a dozen meetings with our college and career counselor, where she has had to tell prominent donors, community partners, and staff from institutes of higher education, "We are thrilled that you have taken an interest in what we do for our first generation student population, and we greatly look forward to working together. And I have to tell you that I cannot guarantee that my position will still exist in the future, and therefore I am regrettably not certain what that means for future project effectiveness." This fall, I've heard office staff start their weekly check-in meeting with phrases such as, "We made it through the day without anyone crying." This fall, I hear way more questions than answers. This fall, I see anticipation, fear, anxiety, and anger on the faces of my coworkers, and I find myself worrying how that translates, despite their very best efforts, to their students in their classrooms. Never before have I witnessed a group of competent, compassionate, dedicated professionals reduced to tears for lack of not being properly trained to do their jobs. I find myself frustrated and disheartened by our district's lack of creative vision, clear communication, professional respect, and curiosity. You would not run your households this way. You would not run your respective businesses, your professional practices, or your institutes of higher education this way. And I expect that you will not stand by and allow our school district to run this way. I am always one to assume good intentions. Therefore, I will hold out hope that the weeks and months that lie directly ahead of us will usher in a sea change in terms of how the district embraces the predicament we find ourselves in and seeks viable, sustainable, transparent, and collaborative solutions. I will hold out hope that understanding is sought, questions are asked, and thoughts drift outside of the proverbial box. In times of difficulty, there certainly lies opportunity, and this district, unique in every conceivable way, deserves every opportunity to thrive, serve, educate, heal, and grow. You have a wealth of knowledge and experience at your fingertips. We are educational excellence. We are loyal. As Mount Baker School District staff, we expect that you regard us as such. It is no small charge, but we wouldn't be true to ourselves if we didn't ask for every bit of transparency, respect, and effort from you all in return. Thank you.
Robert Boncha?
Thanks for giving me the floor. My name is Robert Bonchef, and I've been teaching on this campus for 27 years. And I've been a tax-paying, voting yes on every levy citizen for 26 years. This is my home. I feel like my house is on fire. In August 31st, 2007, there was a Vader school district that was deemed insolvent because they had money problems and they couldn't pass levies, and they were absorbed into the Castle Rock School District. They lost their identity. In addition to that, the citizens there, their property taxes went up because they were part of a different district that had higher taxes. I don't want that to happen to us. And I say us because you guys live here, and your kids go here. I mean, this is not just my house, it's our house. I mean, Linden, they put out information to all of their citizens about the levy, saying where it was going to, the importance of it, even put it in the paper. I've seen nothing. I mean, I've been here for 27 years. We were in a position like this before, and it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as this. Now, when we got the information from our superintendent in August that we were in binding conditions and that we had to come up with $4 million in 2 years, I thought, how in the heck does that even happen? I know that staffing will have to get a cut, I get that. But I started trying to get information because that's the type of person I am. I said, okay, well, you know, where is this money going to come from? And so I was asking people in different departments and they were helping me out and, you know, it was great. And then I get an email saying, I'm sorry, I'd like to help you, but we've been instructed by the district office to no longer give you information, but have you fill out a request for information form. I was like a punch in the gut. I was like, okay, here I am trying to do this. There's already a palpable sense of lack of transparency and mistrust. And I mean, I didn't go down that trail of why. I just said, okay, fine. So I filled out the paperwork, got the information, and I emailed you each 3 PowerPoints of these ideas I have. They're radical, but they're doable, and it's just the numbers. And I kind of want to share them to you. But before I do, I also sent you the RCW. It had to do with binding conditions, and I kind of wanted you to look at Article 1C because the wording seems to imply that we have to have a plan in place approved by the OSPI within 2 years, not 4 million in 2 years. If that's the case, we can get a plan in place soon, and we might have a grace period. I mean, I don't know if you guys knew that already, but if that is true and you knew it, I mean, telling people would be saving a lot of sleepless nights and a few ulcers. I mean, the morale is so low. It is bad. But anyway, so I'm just going to kind of give you the rundown of the 3 PowerPoints, the 3 different ideas. One of them was the after hours program and the late bus. So the late bus, and these are 2-year figures. In 2 years, the late bus for fuel and drivers is $251,105.14. The staffing for 2 years for the people doing the homework help is $44,880. So that's $295,985.14 in 2 years. Athletics. I would never propose, closing out or cutting athletics, not to the bone, not getting rid of it because we'd lose kids. But I mean, these are just the numbers. So here they are for 2 years. With all the paid coaching stipends, we pay out $679,794.34 for coaches. The away game transportation in 1 year, these are last year's numbers, were $187,163.80. That's a total of $866,958.14 in 2 years. The third one is Acme. Now, if we closed Acme for 2 years and moved them here to the Deming Elementary, there's enough vacancies in the junior, senior high schools to move our teachers there. If Acme came here for a couple of years, there would be energy costs, and I'm sad to say with staffing costs, because there'd be a lot of redundancy. But Acme, in the 2-year period, spends for energy $89,864.62. That's through 4 different energy companies. For staffing redundancy, I was very conservative. I only picked 4: an administrator, 2 secretaries, and a custodian. Truthfully, there would be more because you'd have cafeteria staff. There's probably there's more than that. But with those alone, that would be $689,000, which would be a total of $778,864.62. That's 1.9 million in 2 years. But like I said, if there is a 2-year mark, we're already 2 months into that. But if we just have to have a plan in place, and I don't know where you guys are on that, you have so many valuable assets with staff. There's people that run programs and know a lot where money comes to and where it goes. I mean, to do triage, there's a lot of people who want to help. But I got to tell you, there's a definite sense of mistrust. It's just, people feel sick. I mean, it's just, for anyone to say, oh no, things are going great. I mean, if you talk to teachers, you'd find that that's really not true. So anyway, I mean, you guys have a huge job. I mean, you have to make the decisions, and I know they're tough ones, and I respect that, but we really need your help. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole Jones?
All right,
Good evening. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Nicole Jones. I started teaching agriculture education at Mount Baker High School in junior high last year, and I've been honored to work in such a welcoming and supportive community. I am one of 6 career and technical education teachers at Mount Baker High School in junior high. Our CTE program provides pathways in subject areas such as metals, natural resources, horticulture, culinary, and manufacturing, allowing students a direct path into the work industry and the opportunity to graduate. In our CTE programs, we expand on learning beyond the classroom through job site visits, industry field trips, guest speakers, and hands-on experiences. Currently, I'm in my 4th year teaching, and last year, for the first time since COVID, I watched students get back to their normal routines, getting involved in sports, drama, FFA, and other intercurricular and extracurricular activities. I myself finally got to experience taking students to compete in career and leadership development events, livestock sales fair, and state convention. Students are excited to have something to be involved in again. And even though our student enrollment at Mount Baker has declined as a whole, our FFA membership has actually continued to increase. Mount Baker High School enrollment is currently at about 433 students, 93 of which are FFA members. That's 21% of our entire school. This is the highest our FFA enrollment has been since COVID. It has been extraordinary to watch students grow and develop throughout the year based on the opportunities that they are involved in at school. Students have a passion and a drive to get involved right now, to participate, compete, and excel in the opportunities that programs such as FFA provide. And if we take those opportunities away now, we might not see that motivation and involvement come back again, something that we have all worked tirelessly to revive following COVID. Through the CTE classes and career and technical student organizations such as FFA, students earn certifications, they develop leadership traits, creative thinking, communication, and other career-focused skills. Our classes are the reason that a lot of students come to and stay in school. They see value in the subjects that we teach, and they often learn to envision a future for themselves that they did not see before stepping through our classroom doors. Simultaneously, they can earn science, fine arts, math, and college credits through our courses. Since I have been here, 236 CTE dual credits were earned over the last 2 years. 338 students have earned certificates in various areas of CTE, including OSHA 10, first aid, cybersecurity, welding, and more. Unfortunately, not all of these opportunities may be available next year, as we are faced with the tough decisions and budget cuts ahead. Many of these opportunities that we provide students require intensive planning a year in advance. If we choose to make decisions later rather than sooner, we will negatively impact our students, our CTE programs, graduation rates, and in turn their futures by not being able to pre-plan these tough decisions. All of us at the Mount Baker School District will be impacted by the budget cuts and decision-making process. And with that in mind, I ask that the school board be as transparent and logical as possible when making informed decisions to ensure the best outcome for our students and this community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindy Jewell?
Okay, my name is Lindy Jewell, and I am a secretary at Kendall Elementary, which, by the way, is a job that I love. I'm a parent of 2 Mount Baker students, one current and one recently graduated. My husband and I are graduates of Mount Baker, and I'm a proud Mount Baker community member. I'm coming here tonight with 2 requests from the school board. It's no secret that our district is in a pretty disheartening situation right now. There are a lot of questions and not as many answers. Obviously, the budget's at the forefront of everyone's mind. I'm a member of the secretary classification that was pretty brutally hit by the budget cuts last year. I was one of the lucky ones that kept my job. I can tell you, besides the loss of people, the hardest part of the cuts last year was the waiting game. For months, we knew that cuts were on the table and didn't know if or how we would be impacted. It wasn't just the jobs, it was people's livelihoods that were in limbo. So here we are again, budget issues and looming budget cuts. My first request from you guys tonight is that you be as proactive and transparent as you can be with the decisions that need to be made. While there may be some ugly news that needs to be delivered, it'll be ugly no matter if it's delivered early or late. The sooner we can know what we're dealing with, the sooner we can accept it and make plans moving forward, both personally and professionally. One of the big decisions that's the talk of the town right now is the shift to a new superintendent. From an outsider's perspective, it seems that the current superintendent gave her notice to leave several weeks ago, and there's not been any statement made to the public about a plan moving forward. I remember our search for the superintendent about 5 years ago that was a long, in-depth process that used lots of time, energy, and resources. I feel like we don't have an abundance of any of those currently. Yet this decision has an incredible impact on our district's future, especially at such a volatile time. My second request from you tonight is that you communicate clearly with the community to let us know what the plan is for filling the superintendent position. Will we be promoting from within, hiring an interim superintendent, hiring an outside applicant? Is there a plan? If so, when will the plan be public knowledge? With so many looming changes, having a new leader in a position looking out for the best interest of our district long-term needs to be a priority. To say there's a lot depending on this decision being made would be a massive understatement. The sooner we have the replacement superintendent on board, the sooner we can focus on the future of our school district. Again, my two requests from you: transparency about decisions being made and some serious movement toward hiring a new superintendent.
Thank you.
Okay. So, board comments. Russ, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I've had opportunities in the last several weeks, again, to meet with a variety of staff members from some of our secretaries, trying to plan some other secretary meeting later, food service, teachers, and administrators. And I really appreciate the opportunity to hear from all of those folks, including the staff members that are attending tonight. And so that's that, and working on the things that are being requested have been the main activities that I've been spending my time on. So thank you.
Annie, you got anything?
No, I don't have anything today. Just thanks everybody for coming. It really, really is helpful for us to get information from y'all as community members, as professionals working in the classroom, and coming and speaking to us and giving us more information is really helpful. So thanks for coming. And for those on the video.
Yeah, I second that. I've been on the board for 2 years, and I think the last 2 board meetings are the first time I've really ever heard any feedback from anybody. So it's nice to get it, and I appreciate it, and I'm listening, and I'm going to the play this weekend, so I'm excited for that. Ed?
Cool. Yeah, so I attended the junior high girls fast pitch end of season ceremony that they have. Super cool. I haven't been to one before, but it's a really nice event. And you know, we've got a lot of coaches that have been there for 10, 20 years. And I feel really appreciative that we have people showing up to do a job that's hard. It's really hard to get coaches, so really appreciate that. And this weekend, Mount Baker is hosting cross-country districts at the Deming Log Show Saturday morning. Bring your cowbells. Be there. Should be good. Sunny day, so that's great. I was thinking about, so one of the things that dropped our funding is the drop in the regionalization rates. The higher the number, the more money we get. So it went from 1.12 to 1.09, it's dropping to 1.06. And my thought was that since we are one of the few school districts that's in binding conditions, maybe the state would make an exception and extend that. So I reached out to the state superintendent. I heard back from the CFO, TJ, and he said that that type of request would need to go through the state legislature. So I've reached out to them as well. And I feel like if they're going to make an exception for anybody, they should make an exception for, you know, somebody like us that's in binding conditions. So I've reflected a little bit on, the comments that we had last time and the comments that we've had today. And, the common theme is transparency. And so what I take that to mean is it's not just enough to do the work. It's important to share the process that's involved. And, I'm aware that we can't say things that could be construed as meddling in future negotiations with regards to contracts, but we could and should be transparent on the processes that we're following with regards to how we are going to be going about reducing costs, how we are going about replacing the superintendent. And, there's a lot of balls in the air, but, taking that time to be clear about that. And it might be uncomfortable things. I would like to understand how our contract affects our costs and how those contracts compare with school districts like Meridian and Nooksack. And that's uncomfortable, but I don't think saying that interferes with the negotiation process. I just want to be clear about what we are going to be doing. Otherwise, people don't know. And, trust isn't there. So we have to earn that back up. And part of the way we can do that is to be transparent. I think we can do and should do a better job with that. That's it.
Danielle?
As a newer board member, this has been a very intense learning process for me. I want to communicate to those of you that spoke this evening that I'm listening. I'm listening and I share your values of transparency and of logical decisions and processes and collaboration. I think the board, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say we are working with many of the same questions that you are asking us and reaching out to folks at the state level to give us suggestions for how to move forward in the best ways possible. And it is absolutely important to me to tap the expertise of the people that work in this district and they know far better than I do the details and the ins and outs. And I want to say that it's my intention to honor that and to advocate for that in the process that we're moving forward. I think that the board will do our best to communicate once we've got something to communicate, but we are working on the questions that you're bringing to us. And I know that you won't trust that until you see what it is that we're doing, but we're listening for what that's worth. And I really appreciate the courage that you've taken here tonight to share with us what you're seeing and what you're struggling with in your work environments and with your colleagues. And that uncertainty can be very hard to sit with. And I just want to acknowledge that. I, in addition to the other learning I've been doing, found this little gem at the Deming Library, The History of the Mount Baker School District, and I've been reading it this week. I'll report back more when I have some summation of what to say. I'm sure some of you have maybe seen this before. It's not a recent history, but it's the foundational beginnings of our district. And I just want to remind us all that we come from, and I grew up in this community that has a long history of people fighting and working hard for education. This district started with one-room schoolrooms with 6, 12 students, kids walking down trails to get to class. It's inspiring to see the history of care and grit that underpins this community. And so I'll share more if folks are interested as I finish reading that, but it is a bit of hope to see how hard folks before us have worked to build this place, and inspires me more to be a steward that cares for that long history of determination and dedication. So sorry for the long comment.
Don't apologize.
Okay, that's my piece for this week.
There's a copy of this out in the lobby here.
There's another copy in the lobby.
Yeah.
I was wondering about
There's a whole
the,
bunch right here.
oh, I was so excited about it. I was wondering what the copyrights on this and how could I get my own copy for this? Oh, cool.
And there's other stuff.
Really inspiring.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. So action items. And what do you like present those or what do we do?
Good question. I think you and I are both in unfamiliar spots tonight, so
Yeah.
I guess we'll make our way through this the best we can. The first resolution is about the Hopewell Grange in particular. In working with the board the last couple of years, it's been a desire to look at if it serves real school use. And this is the resolution that, if passed, would deem that the property no longer has a valid use for us. It's a step in the process in which we would then, if it passes tonight, would declare a session for public comment. We would advertise a public comment that would move us closer towards the potential of selling the property. There are, again, under the direction of the board is why we bring this resolution forward. That said, there's some strong benefits with the potential sale of the Hopewell. The way the state law reads is the sale of this property can either go towards the capital fund or the debt services fund. So while it doesn't go right to our general fund, as you know, the cost to run our district can't all be covered by capital. So you don't want to budget with one-time incomes, but this does create, if we move forward with the sale, it could create some capacity within our capital, which then wouldn't draw as much from the general fund. So that's what we're looking at. Again, if it passes tonight, then at the November 9th board meeting, you would hold a public comment period separate from the traditional comment period in which members of the public can come and speak their piece about if they're in favor or not in favor of selling the property. If at that point, once you hear that input, you choose to sell it, then we would go through the process of working with a broker to sell it.
Anybody have any comments or questions about this resolution?
Just a comment that the Hopewell Grange was originally an elementary school that was consolidated into the larger district. I can't tell you the date off the top of my head, but was sold to a Grange perhaps only for $1. That happened quite frequently, with the caveat that it would revert back to the district if they no longer wanted it. So that's just a little piece of history on that building.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Russ.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I wanted to say that the board has looked at this for a number of years. We've looked at other options of what we could use the building for. We even looked at the feasibility of moving the building to another site more central to the district. And none of those options were at all feasible. So I think that we've come over those years to the conclusion in my mind that the best thing moving forward is to initiate the sale of the property.
All right,
So
well,
I'm in favor of that.
I am too.
Well, I will entertain a motion to, anybody else? Entertain a motion to, wait, is that one else? But to approve Mount Baker Board Resolution 2324.6.
Move to approve Mount Baker Board Resolution 2324.6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, we got resolution 23-24-7.
So this is the EP&O Educational Programs and Operations Replacement Levy. This is that levy cycle that's every 4 years. This is the one where the rates are determined by statute. So there's the max is not at discretion of the board. You can choose to ask for less money, but in this case, you guys have recommended that we ask for the amount, the greatest amount possible under state law. So that's the way this resolution was developed, was to pass resolution to put before the voters in the February 2024 election, asking them to replace the levy that will be sunsetting.
Any questions or comments?
No, just that, when you look at a tax bill, it's a little bit confusing, the property tax bill, because there's so many things. And I know we've got some work to do between now and when this levy passes, but I think it would be helpful to show an example with the $400,000 house, exactly what are the lines that our levy actually affects, and the amounts, what it was and what it's going to be, because there's state school tax, which is kind of confusing because later you have the school district tax on there as well, right? So I think just having that example on there, showing what it was, what it will be, what the levy affects, and then obviously the examples of what the past 6 years paid for and what planned for the next 6 years, right?
And so this one right now, the EP&O is a 4-year
That's a
one.
4-year
So
one.
the next
Okay.
resolution will talk about the 6-year.
Okay.
one. Yep.
In either case, we should provide all that information.
Yeah, and to answer that point, and also a point that was brought up earlier, we've been working closely with the communications department at the ESD to develop those pieces to share with the public and the community what those funds are used for. There's the balance of what we can advertise versus what we can advocate for under the law. But we have some materials ready to go assuming this resolution passes tonight.
Right. I just want to make sure people know that there was a levy that had passed, and we're looking. Some people don't know. They might think, oh, we don't have a levy, or we didn't pass one, or why would we approve one now, right? So there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding about that will need to be pretty clear on to get that to pass it again, like we did last time.
That this money is to continue the level of funding from the community that we've had up to this point.
Right.
And that not passing a levy would mean a significant loss, not extra money, but loss.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Russ has his hand up again.
Yes. So the educational programs levy is one. The name has changed, but it's been essentially the same levy for long before I've been on the school board, 24 years. We renew it currently every 4 years, and I think it's built in with an inflation factor, but to explain it best, it's the standard levy that we've had. That used to be called maintenance and operations levy all those years. So and then from the communication standpoint, it is our normal practice for the district to have a fact sheet in our newsletter prior to the levy election. So I anticipate we will do that with the facts, including, as you're mentioning, Ed, a chart showing the cost per house at a $400,000 house. So the cost per thousand translated into 400,000 increments. So I think that that it's our responsibility to in shepherding the district funds to pass this resolution this time and submit the levy to the voters.
I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 23-24-7.
Motion to approve resolution 23-24-7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Resolution 23-24-8.
So this is the renewal capital projects levy. This is the one that's every 6 years. So every 12 years, these two will come into alignment. This is where the board does have some discretion in what they ask the taxpayers to pay for. The current capital levy that will be sunsetting was a $10 million ask. It's coming up on its 6th year. This resolution drafted here that you all have reviewed and had input on is asking for $12 million. Some of the previous projects that have been funded by the capital levy are things like the renovations to the field house, some of the playground structures in our district, the new roof at Kendall, as well as a lot of our technology pieces as far as replacing Chromebooks and upgrading our infrastructure. And again, if this resolution passes tonight, choosing to put it on the ballot, that's when we're able to start the mechanisms of communication around what's been delivered with the previous capital levy and what are the plans for this upcoming levy. The piece I'd add here too is that some of our staff are working hard on some capital bonds, or capital, sorry, not bonds, capital grants that we can use that would give us some more flexibility should this levy pass. So if this levy passes, even though, let's say there's a project in there for a sprinkler system at Kendall, if Tom's able to work with a funder for the state to get a grant for that, that just gives the board more flexibility with what that amount was for. You work through mechanisms to reallocate that somewhere else. Yeah.
And it could, maybe just for folks who are listening,
Sure.
we've got quite an audience.
Yeah.
Maybe differentiate a bit the difference between capital funds and the previous levy. We were just talking about the EPNO.
Sure, certainly, yeah. So capital funds have, and Brian, if I speak, please step in. Capital funds have very specific uses for them. They can very narrowly be used for some personnel, so we try to be flexible and mindful in that. That if someone is working with some capital projects such as technology or maintenance of our longer, bigger buildings, we can definitely pay for some personnel with that. Whereas EP&O, it's a pretty wide open bucket in which you can pay for staff, you can pay for whatever you choose. Capital has some very specific rules with it, and that's why, as much as I would love to say we can pass a capital levy and pay for every human under the sun, it's just not that way. Which is it's a good point to create that distinction that we'll try as much as we legally are allowed to help our general fund, because that's where we have that choice. So as much as we're legally allowed to stretch that capital project to benefit our educational programs, we will.
And you would say that capital funds are kind of the general bucket is for infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So buildings,
Mm-hmm.
roofs.
Yep.
Not ongoing maintenance, but one time.
Yeah. Big investments.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Russell's hand up.
Wes.
Yeah, I think the way I would explain it is operating funds can be used for capital, but capital funds by and large cannot be used for operating. Very narrow expenses that we do transfer. And so as a result, we've had the capital projects levy in place for 12 years, and that is money that would have come out of our operating budget, reducing our operating budget by the amount that we've collected on capital. So looking at this year, if we funded all the things that we did on an annual basis on capital, our 2-year deficit of 4 million would convert to a 2-year deficit of 8 million. So I think that this levy is very important to preserve our buildings and also to preserve the funds in our operating budget that otherwise would have to be transferred to, if we had HVAC problems, we would have to pay them out of operating. We used to do that before we started the capital projects. So I think this is essential to both keeping our buildings intact, paying other necessary capital and technology expenses, and also protecting our operating budget.
No, I just want to clarify that the 12 million is spread out over 6 years.
That's correct. Yeah, it's not Yeah, it's 2 million a year for 6 years. That's not 12 per year.
Right.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So, and we had previous meetings, we talked about the categories, school safety and security, equitable access to facilities, playgrounds, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, technology, electrical improvements, end of useful life facilities. So I think we've been through this. We need to put it to the voters to ask for it. We need to do a good job of explaining what it's for.
And the dollar amount is derived from a list of things that need
Right.
work.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 23-24-8.
Motion to approve resolution 23-24-8.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 23-24-9.
So similar to what we're just talking about with the capital levies, there are very small, narrow spots in which we are able to pay for some things out of the general fund. And so Brian has worked diligently with legal to make sure that we can do that. What we're doing is advisable. But what this does is by taking some money out of the capital projects fund to the general fund, it makes that balance higher, which we have greater discretion over, which means if we need to support the needs of staff and students, we can more freely do that with general. So being able to justify this move from capital funds over to the general fund makes it, you know, a little better for us as far as our ability to be flexible with those funds.
Any questions or comments? Good. I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 23-24-9.
Motion to approve resolution 23-24-9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and a new buses quote, 23-24.
That's right. So
24.
Oh,
Must be 10.
I
Right?
think it's 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say so.
Yeah, exactly. So the replacement of buses occurs every few years based on money we get from the state in the Transportation Vehicle Fund. Thank you, Brian. So the TFV is money that comes from the state based on the depreciation of our fleet. So Brian, am I correct that anytime we buy a bus, it's paid for by that? Or is there?
At a minimum,
Okay.
if we do things like automatic chains or,
Okay.
enhanced lighting or security in the bus, those things are not paid for.
Okay,
Excuse me, 4 tires and yellow sides with a special yellow paint.
Okay.
Covered, engine, axles.
and to that point, we always add automatic chains to our buses here at Mount Baker. So for the majority of the buses paid for by the
You had automatic.
chains. It's this kind of cool system where the driver can push a button and these wheels come down behind their back wheels and it shoots chains out underneath their back wheels.
No.
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
Don't believe it. All right,
Okay,
I'm
we're
gonna see
gonna
that.
need to see that
Yeah,
at one of our visits.
You do that when I get
Okay,
home.
I'll see if.
Put that on our
Sounds like Batman.
Yeah, they're pretty cool system, honestly. Yep. So there's the bus quote, so 23-24.
Okay, any questions about the bus quote? No? Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the bus quote for 23-24. 10?
Motion to approve 23-24-4.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Director of Finance report.
Hello. Thank you all for having me again. It's good to be here. So we can go ahead and start the report. There are the current fund balances. I say current because you did just approve a motion for a capital projects fund transfer to the general fund, so that will happen. You approved one earlier that will also happen. The first one was 283,000 or so, and this one was 171,000 or so. That just did not occur in the last fiscal year. So those numbers still are changing. The year-end report was due yesterday. I have until tomorrow to finish it, and I will. But until that gets finished, there will still be some motion in some of those numbers and accounts. But those are the current and most accurate fund balance that we have. So that's a little more explanation of that. You know, as of 10/23, when I pulled those reports, those were accurate. And they will come, you know, they will be settled eventually. But this is just the time we've crossed a fiscal year and we're managing the end of the year. So the next slide talks a little about that as well. And on the budget status report, that's the other report that I give you. So you have a trial balance report that comes with those fund balances that are correct. And the budget status report is an accurate report of expenditures and revenues and the different accounts that have comings and goings from them. But currently that fund balance line in that report is not accurate. And that's because we have a backlog of due to and due from activity in those accounts. So for example, last year 22-23, we received some grant money. We applied for the grant and this is the normal state grant reporting stuff. The money that we applied for in August, we didn't receive until September. So I put it in a due from other government agencies account. And then when we received it in September, I moved it back out as received. And that's what those accounts are for. There is historic activity in there that's throwing off the fund balance on that report. So that's why you receive some different numbers on that report. That report has good information for us all to have, and we'll cover some of that today. But I just wanted to give a little explanation of that's what we're looking at when you say like, well, there's a fund balance here and there's a fund balance there because of a backlog of due to and due from, which will be corrected, but they are not corrected yet. Other questions on that before I go on? Okay, the fund balances in the trial report or the trial balance report and in this presentation are accurate. There's an enrollment report as of October 19th. You'll see the budgeted line there and the actual line. We'll keep populating that and track that. Currently, we're less 17 and a half kids or so. And you can see there's a negative impact to our bottom line. If we wanted to, we could have OSPI make an adjustment now, and they would adjust that budgeted line down, and the apportionment that we receive from the state would correct for next month. I don't see a benefit in doing that. They'll adjust it themselves in January. And until then, we can get the increased cash flow coming in. And then in January, you'll see that the budgeted line go down to be more in line with what our actuals are. And from January on through August, we will receive lower apportionment amounts based on a lower actual enrollment. Right now, they're going on the budgeted enrollment, which is higher than we have right now. So the next two slides will be more useful as the year goes on. This one will track our revenue to 100%, and we'll see. So this one may not reach 100% because of the difference in apportionment we receive based on lower enrollment. The next one is the same thing, but for expenditures. So as we go throughout the year, we'll see that that's what we projected in expenditure. So this one we don't want to hit 100%, but still may because that's what we projected. The projection is as accurate as we can make it. So those are two things we'll be tracking as we go along. Those do come from the the budget status report that you all receive monthly as well.
Would it be possible in the future to get that, not just percentage, but the actual dollar value?
Yes,
on the left?
I will try. Okay. I'm sure it's possible.
Oh.
I'll figure it out in Excel. Yes. This one is a revenue yearly comparison. So you see 22-23 in blue, 23-24 in orange. More revenue this month than there was previous Septembers. I think that is due to the timing of grant money collection, though. I think previously it was collected at different times. So yeah, that's my thought. But those are the numbers. So there you go. The next one is the same for our expenditures. And this one, I think does reflect the actions that the board has taken by directing us for a hiring freeze and a spending freeze. You'll see our expenditures are lower, even though inflation is up significantly. So that's good news. The next slide is our revenue to expenditure comparison. You see we are spending more than we are receiving, which is what we expected and budgeted for. Are there questions about that before we move on from that series?
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering, I mean, at some point we'll need to talk about how we're meeting the binding condition, how that fits into that. Like, I know that doesn't look good, but I'd like to understand, despite that, are we still gonna meet the binding condition requirements? By the end of the year?
Yes, that's a good point. And, this is what the budget was for. If you go back to the last slide, this is a good step in that direction that we can point to and say, look, we've taken action and it's panning out for us to meet that requirement. But actions we're taking now won't, the action required for binding conditions is to budget for solvency plus 5% by the end of the 24-25 school year.
Right.
So that process will take place throughout the year as we decide, as the board decides, what actions you will take to become solvent. And that will meet the conditions of binding conditions. We have had our first meeting, which is another one of those conditions. There's the two kind of main ones is that OSPI receives all of this information that I present to you. We have meetings quarterly and we plan to become solvent. Yes.
So since we've had questions before, just to try and clarify what that means. The planning needs to happen this year, but the actual action items that will result in cost reductions are going to be implemented next year.
Any action we can take, I would recommend that we do. But most of our expenditures are contractual, and there's not a lot of other action that we can take. The spending freeze was great and has been impactful already, and I think that's showing up in the data. It's not a small step, right? So that's great action that the board took. But yes, you're correct. We're mostly in a planning phase.
The details of binding conditions, have those, like the description you said, right, the first meeting, having to show improvement, solvency plus 5% by the end of 24-25 school year, have those and other requirements that we'll be needing to meet been communicated out to the district staff?
Not more than in these public meetings.
Okay. I would encourage that. So that people understand that we are aware and that these are some of the checkpoints that we're working to meet, and then to show how we're making progress toward those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I think you're correct, and I think that the comments were valid, and I'm very glad to hear that. And as we've had that first meeting, that was last week. It was mostly a meet and greet, not a lot to report from that, but though I do have some things to report to you that came from that tonight. And I have heard that we should report more to the staff, and you'll see later on in the agenda that we have a plan for a tour to go to every elementary school and do presentations here on campus, as well as getting out to the community to try to communicate that information. And you'll see those presentations tonight and be able to give input on what more should be in there, what more you want us to focus on, or you can just tell me it's great, we'll move on. But that's your opportunity to weigh into that, and that is how we're planning to get out into the community with an initial push for some of this information.
So a traveling budget shop.
Correct.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And have we announced it anywhere that we're recording these now?
It says
Our meetings?
record.
It doesn't, it did.
No, I know.
Oh.
Have we announced it to staff or constituents that we're recording meetings and people can access meetings that are recorded?
I don't think either of us were aware that decision was made.
Correct.
Well, let people know, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get it on the Twitter.
So we can move on 2 slides. This is nothing new. No changes to that. In the end of year-end reporting, that fund balance starting point may move, but it hasn't yet. So if you go to the next one.
Before we move on.
Yeah.
That, the end of the chart there, August, that's about the -$1 million.
This one, I believe, shows it at -560,000.
-560, okay. And that, and what are we required to be at that point per binding conditions?
No less than -1.17 million.
No less than no worse than 1.17.
Correct.
And this has us at -550.
So that's the condition that we're anticipating we will meet.
Okay. Good. Okay, so it's negative, but it's less negative than what our binding conditions require.
Correct.
So we're on track.
At the time of, yes, the binding conditions being put in place with OSPI, the estimate was -1.17. The current estimate is, I believe, -560 or so. The transfers from capital projects will certainly help with that. Inflation and high diesel costs will not. So it's a projection. It's part of the job to predict the future. I'm predicting we will do okay with that one, and feeling confident that we will.
Right.
Yep.
So even though it doesn't look like a win, there is positive progress there.
Correct.
We're on better track than we have to be.
Correct.
So another good point to share out at your
Yes.
roadshow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So that's the long-term projected fund balance. Again, has not changed, and inclusive of necessary reductions that are still under development.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's always assumptions built into projections. And are there any assumptions that were built into that are things that I don't know, that are not, I guess, just trying to figure out where the risk is on that. Because we haven't, there's still a lot of unknowns left that we have to go through in terms of contracts and whatnot. So I'm just wondering what kind of assumptions were
Yes.
made.
It does not reflect any changes in contracts. It does not assume that there will be any. It does not assume any legislative action,
Okay.
though we can hope, and it's a great thing to advocate for. And I would encourage everybody here at the meeting and all of our board members to reach out to our local representatives.
Right.
That's something we can hope for, but again, we're not planning for, so it's not a built-in assumption. The assumptions here are fairly conservative, but it does, as we discussed earlier, there is a plan to reduce by dollar amounts this year and next year, and those are the assumptions that are built in.
And at any point in where we're negative, or I guess anywhere, do we fall beyond what's required by binding conditions? I know at the end of this year, we're not, but past that.
The conditions will likely change for next year, because I don't anticipate budgeting to be up to 5% by the end of next year. But that's okay, and that just means that we'll have a second year of getting to that mark that we need to get to. Yes, so we have binding conditions for this year, and then we will have likely binding conditions for next year as well.
Right.
And that will be based on our projections at that time. I'm sorry, that's a non-answer.
Yeah.
But no, this does not project us not meeting any of those binding conditions. So there's a resolution that was distributed to the board that is a resolution for an apportionment advance. So what this does is give us time to get our replacement levies in place, at which time the county treasurer will be much more willing to work with us, or we will have a much more favorable outlook when we go to get a loan in the private sector. So currently we don't have those levies in place as future revenue. So there are some major uncertainties. What this does is allows us to collect 10% of our apportionment for the rest of the year in advance in November if the board chooses to take that option. You go to the next slide. That shows what that would do to our fund balance. So you see the timing there in February. our replacement levies could be in place. The collection won't start until next January, but that's when like the old levy goes away, which gives us from February until June to either secure a loan in the private sector or work with the county treasurer to make a plan.
Sorry, when you were first talking, I was thinking the apportionment advance was the loan from the county. That's not what that is.
No, an apportionment advance. So apportionment is the money we get from the state monthly based on our student count and category of programs.
Okay.
The loan that we are working with from the county would be a tax anticipation note, where they would say, based on your future revenues, we'll loan you this amount, and they can set up a much more favorable repayment plan and interest rate than the private sector would likely do for us.
Okay.
So this apportionment advance simply is a mechanism to buy us more time, specifically to get our levies, our replacement levies, hopefully in place and have a stronger financial outlook when we go looking for that gap
And
funding.
does that cost us money?
It does not.
It does not.
It does not.
Okay.
The law says that any district can do it, and that it has to be repaid by June, and that at no point can OSPI give a negative apportionment. So we could not take it all and just say, you know what, in June, just take the rest and whatever else we're negative, right? We have to, so we start in this plan, we start repayments in April. And so it's 250,000 in April, 500,000 in May, and then the remaining for some odd thousand in June. So it gives us an advance of about I should have put the figure in the slide. It's over $1 million. I want 1.19, but please don't quote me on that.
And we're banking that we get that advance on our apportionment. We're banking on that levy, those two levies passing so that we can take out a loan to cover the repayment.
No, so the apportionment advance will be repaid, but the loan that we need for the gap funding, yes, will have to be repaid.
Okay.
And we will be looking for a loan whether or not the levies pass.
So can you say again, in maybe another way, because I think this is really important for people to catch. What is the importance of the levy to our ability to secure a loan to carry us through while we make adjustments?
Yes. And I would start that answer and that topic by saying that the levy is always critical to maintain the current operation of the district at the levels that it has been funded for the past decades, because the levy is an important piece of the funding that we currently have. When we look for a gap funding, and I don't want to sound like we haven't been looking already. We're putting plans in place, but when we go to finalize those plans, if we have levy collections set to start coming in when our previous levy expires and sunsets, then our financial outlook is much healthier than it is if we do not have those levies. And that's true just in general. Without those levies, we are losing another over $5 million of our yearly revenue. And that will be more difficult then to repay. And likely if we go to the private sector or the county treasurer, frankly, it would be seen as a riskier loan and have a higher interest rate applied.
Right. I mean, that makes sense to me. Anyone who's gotten a car loan or house loan knows you have to show your income, right? So it makes sense. You don't want to know that the income's there to, increases your chances of getting a loan.
Correct.
But the apportionment, that's something that we can do. We don't need, there's not risk associated with that.
Correct.
Right?
That's something that we have talked to OSPI about. We talked about it on our first meeting. I've worked with the director of apportionment at OSPI to put this in place. She anticipates it coming, and she's seen the numbers and the resolution that I drafted for you guys to view. I didn't want to spring it on you. So if you choose to approve it in your November 6th meeting, as long as we get it to OSPI by November 16th, and if you do in November, it must be November 9th, I'll get it to them by the 10th, and then we will receive that advance in apportionment in November.
And when does our current levy actually expire in terms of the collection of that money? Is that the April tax bill?
Nope, it is in December 31st, January, 2024.
Okay.
That's 2024, that's the year
That's
right now?
right, yeah.
Sorry, I've been in year end, I've been in 2023 and 2022 for the last 2 months, and I've
So
not
the-
yet rejoined.
Yeah, so
I apologize.
I'll try to fill in some airtime to give you a chance to take a
Thank
sip.
you.
So that February ballot, when it passes, that collection will start in January of 2025.
Gotcha,
So that levy sunsets in December of 2024.
gotcha.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another tough question. What happens if the board doesn't approve the apportionment advance?
Then we move forward securing gap funding without the levies in place, and we get whatever rate and whatever program and plan we can.
Okay, that helps clarify.
Yep. And we do have plans in place for that as well, if that's necessary.
And I want to just speak a little bit more about Brian on his behalf as far as the plans in place to seek the gap funding with the treasurer. Brian's been working incredibly hard on that. It's more than just plans. He's been meeting with our county treasurer frequently to discuss, put on his radar that concept of that gap funding to ensure that we have the cash flow to make sure that lights stay on and people stay paid.
Is there any downside to asking for an apportionment advance?
None that I can see.
Because Brian, there's no interest charged on that.
Correct.
Okay.
So it buys us time to hope that levy passes so we can get a better rate later on.
Correct.
It could help save us money.
It will.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yes, please. Same thing, long term, adjusted. Bottom lines don't change. End of years, you see that still down below in June. You'll see it still dipping to the lowest in February of 2025, and then still coming up again, inclusive of necessary reductions that are still under development.
And if we get the loan from the county,
Mhm.
that would affect this chart, I would assume it would.
Yes.
Right.
Yep, well, yeah, yes and no. It depends on how we choose to do that, right? We could show this chart as is and just say these are actual revenues and then reduce some for interest that we would have to pay back.
Right,
Or we could say, hey, we've got this money and float that line above.
right,
It's kind of one or the other, how you want to show it.
right.
But yes, with a tax anticipation note from the county treasurer, we could stay solvent this entire time and then apply a repayment plan with interest down the line. Okay, that's all I have for you today, until the next presentation.
Is that what this is for? The next presentation?
No, that's for board discussion, I believe.
Yeah.
Is the superintendent report next?
Is there any other questions for Brian?
All right, so just on the agenda, we had the director of finance report, and what's next that you're
The
involved with?
superintendent report, but I'm asking if anybody
Do you have
has
any
any questions for Brian for the director of finance report.
Right,
We haven't moved from that.
I know, I'm
Yeah,
just
you gotta-
deciding whether or not my questions are gonna be answered later or not.
So the next portion of the board meeting is the superintendent's report.
Yep.
And Nick will lead into that, but it does go into the budget tour that we're hoping to go on and the
Okay,
information that
okay,
will be
all right.
presented.
Great,
So that is,
gotcha, okay, no questions.
Okay,
I was wondering the same thing.
superintendent report?
Do you want to bring that up now or should we?
I'm just wondering, did we skip the consent agenda?
No,
No, did that?
we did not.
Okay.
Who made the motion?
For consent agenda, it was Ed was first and Danielle was second.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And it's being recorded, so.
Okay.
you can go back if you need to.
Thank you.
So as we've been discussing, we're commencing some budget listening sessions. This is gonna be a preview of the public sessions that are on the dates listed there. The week ahead of that, as Brian has mentioned, and I think Mary has shared with you, we're gonna be going from school to school to meet with staff directly, to discuss with them and hear from them some of their thoughts and share with them the work that has occurred already and what potential future planning looks like. Our thought process for these public sessions with the community, which is going to be important to know, it's the community, right? Because we want to speak to taxpayers, we want to speak to families as well, but I mean, we want to speak to anybody that is willing to come and attend any one of these sessions. The desire is to have all 3 sessions as similar as possible. However, with the audience component, it's hard to predict exactly what the flavor will be that night. Because what we want to have happen is make sure that if someone can attend only one of the sessions, that's the session they attend. But if someone wants to come to all 3, that's their option as well. The structure of it is that we're going to start with Brian sharing some of the background of setting the context or setting the scene for where we are, which is in some of these slides that I'll get into in just a moment. And I believe that the decision has been made to, it is going to be broadcast on Zoom as well. So folks will be able to view it from wherever they are. And there's going to be a few different modalities in which to engage. I think via Zoom, I'm not sure how that process will work to have those folks engage, but those that are there in person can sign up to speak or can submit some digital comments if they want to type a response. I guess perhaps that's could work for the Zoom folks as well, but we're kind of ironing that part out. So as I mentioned, Brian, the evening will start with the building principal, the host principal, introducing the folks that are there from the district office. I know right now the intentions are to have Brian, Mary, myself there. I imagine Bridget and Ian will probably be joining us for these evenings as well. I just don't want to speak for them. And then, so Brian will get into kind of the background, which is what I'll go through now.
What's the venue? You're like in the auditorium, or how is this?
Yeah, and I think that varies location to location. I think depending on the activities that are going on, I know like at Harmony, I think it's going to be in the gymnasium. Kendall, it's going to be in the library. At Acme, library there.
Right.
I hate to interrupt, can we go back to the dates for
Sure.
a moment? I've heard from a few of my constituents concerns that the dates for the listening sessions are after when voters have an opportunity to vote on board positions. And so I'm wondering if it's possible to have, I know it's last minute, but one session prior to that date. And maybe it's a Zoom session online so people could attend from wherever works for them and have that maximum flexibility. But I did hear some concerns from folks that they would like to have an opportunity to weigh in and hear from district leaders and board members before they make their votes.
I will take that under advisement and share that with Mary. The structure here, I don't know how much we planned for participation from board members in answering the questions.
Yeah, well, I was wondering if I was going to ask that because at last meeting, didn't we say that potentially 2 board members would attend each one?
Yes, we did.
Oh, Russ's was.
Yeah.
Russ's hand is up.
Yeah, so we did at last meeting decided that up to 2 board members would attend each meeting. We'd work on that schedule jointly. I think the idea of involving essentially these sessions in campaigning would be unfair campaigning for the board members who are currently incumbent. In this case, it's primarily myself, but I don't think that would be appropriate.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So,
But we still want, that aside, we still want to be at the meetings, yeah?
Yeah, no, and I think that,
And I thought, I mean, I was under the impression that you guys were going to be there. I wasn't sure what role you were going to be serving while you were there, I guess.
Yeah.
It was a clarification, like, I don't know. I mean, I guess as the questions come in, I suppose we could decide at that
I
moment
think
that,
it's just important just to be there to hear
Yeah.
what people are saying.
and that's what my
Sure.
impression
Yeah.
was too, that's why I
I'm
didn't,
not gonna speak to the
I
budget.
didn't,
We know that.
I didn't wanna project that on you, Annie, so I just.
But I do think the board members will have a great opportunity then to hear directly from the public.
Yeah.
And that's
Yes.
part of what we're trying to do, right? It's a budget listening session. It's not a budget speaking session,
Yeah.
right? So we can hear some of the things that we will need to answer to.
And the reason it's two people, so it's not a board meeting.
Not a public meeting, yeah.
Correct, which changes the way that it's run and operates.
Yep.
So we can dive in. And I would encourage the board to give feedback on any of this that you're hearing. So a little bit of background, we're really gonna focus on the McCleary decision because it's becoming more and more clear to everybody that that is one of, if not the major component of funding challenges that are happening all across the state, right? This is a problem for Mount Baker, but it is not a Mount Baker problem. There are 3 districts currently in binding conditions. There are likely to become more. We've heard that there's some in the ESD 112 that as they do their year-end reporting, they're coming under binding conditions. So we've gone from 12 districts in the last 10 years to 5 or more in one single year, right? And that's due largely to the McCleary decision. If you were to time warp back to 2016, which I would recommend if you could, you would see that everybody was talking about McCleary and that they would have to make cuts because of the McCleary decision. We are also losing funding in regionalization, which has been discussed here previously. But that is also part of McCleary. There is an element of paused timber revenue that is not coming into the district. And of course, our declining enrollment is a major factor in our budget situation. So we'll go through each of these items and talk about how we got, like what each of those means for our district, starting with McCleary.
Oh, Russ has his hand up.
Yes, Russ.
Yeah, I think before you go on that slide, I think the 2 things that are not on there that are impacting our budget are staffing levels and cost of living increase.
Okay, thank you. So talking about McCleary, 2012 decision, 2018, the state finally applied a new funding formula for schools. It was really frankly good for some districts and bad for others and didn't actually seem to meet the needs of schools. The McCleary decision said that it's the legislator's paramount duty to fully fund education in the state. And the constitution of the state says that's the paramount duty, right? And that they weren't meeting that. So the Supreme Court agreed, and in 2018, it was finally resolved. That's a great King 5 article about it. And when we do these presentations, we'll make sure that the presentation is on the website. People can find that article. It's very recent and talking about the effects of McCleary. And essentially that, while we're talking about the ESSER cliff, right? ESSER was really a mask. The ESSER money that came in was really a mask for the McCleary drop off, right? We were set to drop off in funding. And then ESSER came in and floated us for a while with extra funding. And now ESSER is going away. And it's not that we're at an ESSER cliff, it's that we're finally now at the McCleary cliff. So the next slide talks a little more about that and how the state did what they did. Essentially, when the Supreme Court said the state has to fully fund education, they said, fine, we're going to increase our portion of your property taxes. But in doing so, to minimize the impact on taxpayers, we're going to severely limit and restrict the local taxes. So the state meets their mandate to fully fund by raising taxes, but then they lower them elsewhere. And that's why our EP&O levy is so severely restricted to a low rate. So that's some about McCleary that I hope, and I should pause here and just say that I hope that the explanations I'm giving and the information I'm giving is enough for people to understand, but not enough to get lost in the weeds, right? Like I know what McCleary is, but I don't know what everybody does. So I'm hoping to explain it in a way that will be understandable to everybody, or at least lead to more questions that we can then answer later. So decreased funding is tied to McCleary. Regionalization was a decision in the McCleary funding formula where they said some districts do need more allocation essentially from the state because of high cost of living or because of historically high funding for schools. And so if a school district gets that, then the districts next to them in that region will get a percent less than that. And as you go farther out, there's a couple percent less than that. So it's not that there's one district in the middle that pays 12% more than everybody else and draws all the talent. It makes it more even across the region. So some districts received nothing in regionalization and others received up to 18%. We received 12. And it's down this year to 9%, and it's going down again to 6%. That's part of a 4-year recalibration of McCleary that's written into the law that says every 4 years, the state has to look at this and make sure they're still meeting their mandate to fully fund special education. The state looked at it and said, hey, we could take some money away, and they did. So our funding is decreasing by legislative action. The county council heard from DNR about putting a pause on some of our timber harvests. And when that was analyzed, we found that we had about $615,000 in missed revenue or revenue that's not come in yet based on what could have come from timber sales. Yes, Russ?
Yeah, actually, this should be changed. It's just opposite that. The county council asked the DNR to pause. It wasn't the DNR's request. The DNR actually, so it was, they responded to the county council request.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I will find a way to make the wording correct, but I also am not here to throw anybody under the bus. So, but I will make sure that it's accurate. So thank you for that, Russ. I appreciate it. Yep. And the last main factor that we talked about was enrollment. So there's a historic enrollment trend, and you can see it going down over time. This you all have seen before. It's been available to the public, but I don't know how much the public has viewed it. It also includes the figure of about 12,500 students per year to school. That's a figure I just looked at and updated today. So that's an estimate of what the 22-23 allocation was from schools. They haven't updated it since 2021 on OSBI. And the next slide has more about that, about how Washington State schools are funded primarily through enrollment. And if you look at our enrollment of 1939 down to 1531, it's a decrease of 408 students. So if you compared the funding at the level, it's not a direct comparison because that's both levels at 12,500. That number would have been lower, would have been 11,000. So I'll need to fix this one as I talk through it out loud. But if it was that same funding levy, you took that same amount of students and put them in our schools today, we would have $5.1 million more in our budget. So some of the information that was recommended we put in by the admin team when we had them view it and received input from them were some of the things we've already done. For example, non-replacement of staff since the deficit became known, and our future planning numbers of reducing by 2.68, and then in 2024-25 another reduction of 1 million. And the reason that is split, or one of the reasons that is split, is because there are so many variables. Enrollment is a variable, legislative action is a variable. So, we're doing what we need to do for this year, and then, looking at another 1 million potential for the 24-25. But that will mitigate some of those variables because we'll know more about the 24-25 school year when we're actually planning for 25-26 when we're in it.
Okay. A couple of thoughts. So on the first slide, we kind of listed the things that, affected why our revenue's down. And those are things that affected all the schools in the state, a lot of them, right? And yet somehow Mount Baker, we're one of only 3 school districts that's in binding conditions. So there's some things that we've done to get here that are in addition to that. And those are gonna be the things that we need to look at. It's uncomfortable, but if we really wanna correct things, then that's what needs to happen. And I don't know that can happen between now and then. And I know you're new here as well, but I just want to point out that we're missing things. Now, Russ mentioned a couple things that might be a little bit more relevant towards specific to Mount Baker and how we got here. In terms of, Russ, could you repeat that again? What were the two things?
The two things I mentioned were staffing levels and the cost of living increase. The cost of living increase applies to our sister districts. Regionalization hit that drop hit us in ways that it did not hit our sister districts. And then the other thing that I didn't mention in addition to those two things is underfunded special ed costs, which hits districts differently and hits Mount Baker quite hard.
Nick, would you mind taking a couple notes? Sorry, I'm not remember all of those things.
So,
Yes.
what's good about this is I think it's good to inform people because we have to vote on different things that come up. So I think it's good for people to understand that. I'm sure a lot of people voted for McClear and I'm like, dang, that didn't work out the way I hoped it would, right? It's gonna help us, not hurt us. So that's good. I don't know how much time you have. I feel like this could probably be gone through pretty quickly because people are gonna say, okay, that's gonna pass.
Correct.
Great, we know, won't do it again, but what are we doing moving forward, right? So be a small.
Yes. Plans to move through this fairly quickly.
Okay.
Yep. And if there's things that are covered in here that you don't want covered or don't think are necessary, please let us know and we'll work to streamline the presentation. So the next is more a little bit about, what is our actual expenditure breakout. And this, again, you guys have seen this was in our, the first presentation that I gave to you about the budget in July. But this comes up a lot of people asking about how we can reduce the cuts in specifically maintenance supplies and operating costs. And so we can and we should because everything helps. But this shows the portion of our budget that if we were to stop buying paper, what effect would that have on the total budget? That MSOC expense only being 18%. It's worthwhile to do everything we can, but it's not our most major expense. Yes.
This might not be important for your particular traveling roadshow. I know that's not what you're calling, but I have it stuck in my head. It might be, I would be personally curious to know the breakdown in benefits by classification. Like what we're paying for benefits for certified.
Okay.
Okay.
There'll be more pieces of the pie to look at.
When I first looked at this, my thought was to wrap up all of our human costs together and break out the human cost versus the MSOCs. So I was going the other way with that.
Going more broad.
Correct.
Yeah.
Of what do our people cost, what do our stuff cost?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So we were also asked to put some more information about the binding conditions in here. So the next slides are simply the binding conditions that are there. So there's the question that came up earlier. Number one, binding condition, ending fund balance reported next November is no less than the current budgeted deficit, which is 1.175 million. The next two binding conditions are on the next slide. That all of the information that I share with the board is also shared to OSPI so they can keep track of what is happening here. And then quarterly review meetings that have been scheduled and have begun. The next slide talks about the future planning portion of this, which is to say that the budget we adopt by August 1st of next year must be no less than 5%, the general fund balance at the end of the next budgeted fiscal year should be 1.5 million. which is calculated as 5%, which is board policy of expenditures. And that's the one that if we don't make that condition, we will have new conditions that will extend to the next years. Number 5 relates to that one as well. It says that once we plan to do that in the 24-25 school year, we have to prove in the end of year report for that school year that we did it. Which is why it goes to 2025, when I'll be doing another F-196 to present to OSBI.
So could you go back to that pie chart real quick?
Mhm.
To the point there. When I saw this, I was thinking the next chart was going to be the revenue, because we have expenses and revenues. I kind of think about those together, and I was wondering if there would be a way to put a chart, move that to the left, and on the right, put one based on revenues for those same categories, so that people can see the difference between the two and where, we kind of need to get to.
Revenues, yes, and that's typically broken down into state, local, and federal.
Right.
Not this, and again, I'm trying to be objective and not point to any one particular problem, right? So I think putting it up there, and I appreciate that point, but I think putting it up there and saying like, these are the fundings for those areas would seem like it's leading to a problem. And I could run it by legal to see what we could put up there about state, local, and federal funding, but we don't want to be promoting the levy.
Okay. Well, you could use this year because we already have a levy in place, right?
Correct. So if we go from, this is why we have a budget shortfall, to also the levy, here's the portion of the levy that's a major part of our,
Would
general
it show up
expenses.
that way? I'm just thinking there's like a state model for
And the prototypical.
the
school model.
prototypical model. Like, what would that look like next to that?
That's in the weeds.
Okay. Okay.
And yes, so our plan for some of that information is to have it available to answer questions. And we expect it to come up in some of the questions, but not to lead with it, because that's a rabbit hole. So I could think about some, you're right, some here's where our funding comes from. But I also don't want to,
or maybe even not just revenue, but our budget. What have we budgeted for this year next to our expenses, so that people can see the difference between what we budgeted and what our expenses are, because there's a difference, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me think about that.
Okay.
Think about the best way to present that.
Sure.
Again, in an understandable way for everybody in the public without taking too much airtime,
Okay.
right? So that I could get to the idea of this, remember, to lead to their questions.
Right.
So yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Russ has his hand up.
Yes, Ross.
Yeah, I actually, I appreciate your thoughts there, Ed, but I think that Brian's approach here is probably gonna be simpler and more straightforward. And the questions that you're getting into there, are the ones that I hope that we will cover in the proposal that I bringing forth for our board discussion. But I think for the community meetings, I think keeping these facts accurate, but fairly simply presented like this is better than getting into that level of detail myself.
I'll take a look and see how clean it looks if I include some of the revenue information there. Again, without breaking any of the laws about promoting the levy.
To my comment, you said you had thought about sort of showing all of the categories of people in one. It might be interesting to start with that and then jump to this to break it down a little more so that it helps people see
Gotcha. Okay.
what you were kind of hoping to show there. You could do both.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate the input. So we can skip ahead a little bit. And these were the binding conditions slides as they were presented to the board. So that's already public. And then that was the information that the cabinet and admin team deemed important to share before we start the listening to input. So before we go into the process of receiving input, are there other things that the board thinks are important to include in kind of the background to help people understand more about our situation? Anything missing?
There's an obvious, really tough question that you're probably gonna get asked. And I think it's similar to what Ed was trying to get at earlier. I mean, a lot of this presents why our revenue stream is down. As an everyday person, when I think about my own budget at home, if my income goes down, I'm gonna adjust my spending, right? And so there are gonna be people in the room wondering, how is it that we could we not see that our income was going down? Or did we see it was going down but didn't adjust our spending? People are gonna wanna know how that could happen, and maybe not in understanding the intricacies of educational budgets and projecting and then correcting based off of, right? Like, do you have a plan for how you want to address that? Because I think that's a key question that's gonna come up.
I agree that you're right. And again, part of what I'm trying to do is just explain without, blame or shame. I worked with a counselor closely who says we don't want to shoot ourselves to death, right? And I think talking about what we'll do moving forward will be more productive about talking about what has happened, right? So this gives some of the background of, you're right, our revenue, it does not cover our expenditures, but I think that's a better future conversation. Because I would be concerned then that would become just what we would do is just shoot ourselves at those meetings. And, we could do that all night, but it doesn't get to what we're hoping to get to.
I agree that the long term, the emphasis should be on what we do moving forward, but I do think that it's valid to say what went askew.
Okay.
To make sure we avoid that, replicating that in our attempts to make changes moving forward. Do you know what I think? People are gonna want some kind of acknowledgement of how could this happen?
I think this is less of a shoulds situation and more of an accountability situation. And I don't know that we have to and so did this, so did that, but I do think that it benefits us as a system to rebuilding relationships, to have accountability of we had all these things happen and some things went wrong. And I think that people want to hear that because number one, I think it brings in a human piece again of returning to we want to have these relationships and we want to right the ship. And I don't know that it's a should situation. I think I think accountability is really an important piece in relationship building. And we are asking them to build a relationship with their money. We are.
Okay. Thank you both for that input. Appreciate it. We'll work with the team to figure out the best way to present that. Okay, so next steps, and this is, I'll let Nick take over more here, but the next steps are about the process for input.
Yeah, so the intention is people, if they want to speak or have questions or comment, they can sign in so that we know who to call on. Obviously, we want to make sure that folks are cognizant of time with their neighbors and folks are around. But we're going to be there to try to answer questions the best we can. And if we don't have the answers at the time, make sure we have their contact information, or even if it's an early question in maybe a Monday session, if we can try to get an answer, and share it by the Wednesday session, that'd be ideal. And we'll have opportunities for written comments and questions for them to provide just via writing. Digital feedback, if they want to scan a QR code with their phone and enter some feedback there. And then what we're going to do is bring all those questions back, and if we can start to develop some themes and distill them down, review them as a cabinet, as an admin team, then we can then develop kind of the FAQ document. Or if it tells, if after we take that information, it tells us that we need to engage again, we'll continue to engage again. But the FAQ piece will try to get at, well, if we hear a question at the Acme session is the same question as a Kendall session, there's a good chance that there's gonna be quite a few people with that question. So if we can try our best to articulate the responses to those and create it in a publicly shared document that we can make available to people, those will be our intentions there. Again, as we distill the feedback from those 3 nights, that will very clearly inform our next steps. If we start to hear some common themes from the community about ideas they have, do we then start to make those some of our priorities as a district, where we get a broader feel for folks? We can say, oh, those 3 nights we heard this was a priority for the district. We can use methods in which we survey folks through either telephones or through an electronic survey, get a wider grasp on if that is at a district-wide priority as far as how we navigate these challenges.
So in terms of feedback from staff, like we've had people that have ideas that come in and whatnot, their input and feedback is going to happen at this meeting along with the community members at the same time, or is there additional?
The week before is when we do the school tours. We do staff-specific tours the week before.
Okay.
And that'll be a chance for us. It'll be a similar process where we share some information and we also hear from them and answer questions and get input from them as well.
Okay, good. And is that by department?
It's by location. So the junior high and high school staff are together for that. And then Kendall, Acme, and Harmony have their own individual sessions.
And will board members be invited to those as well?
I think that would be a good question for you to check with Mary on.
Okay.
Just thinking about the logistics of an effectiveness in terms of the meeting and the number of people there, obviously. There should be some strategic meetings with principals at one level. I just don't want to make sure that the value, get the value out of those.
I'm trying to figure out how to say this. The stakes are really high with these meetings, and tension could be very high. And in my experience, sometimes it can be helpful before the meeting begins to set some out of bounds kind of parameters. Not with the intent of quashing people's valid points. I think we want to make really clear that we want to hear people, but maybe just setting some norms of what is not happening here, right? Like, we're not here to comment on an individual person's performance or what. I'm not quite sure what those parameters should be, but I think that maybe think about, again, you want to balance that ability for people to really speak their mind and not feel crushed and let some of those emotions out, but have some boundaries communicated up front about what's maybe too far.
In a similar vein, but very different. I mean, I just keep thinking about and I just wonder what mechanisms can be in place for staff to actually feel like it's like a safe situation to actually share what they're thinking versus what they think that they should say. And I don't know how to do that, but that's just a thing I kept thinking about. Will people feel like it's actually a place where they can actually share some of those things?
Yeah,
and be candid.
Yeah, right. How does confidentiality work for the staff in some of those settings? Or, I think that we're talking about people's jobs and that can bring up some fear for lots of people.
I mean, one thing we heard from a few different people is they're not necessarily interested in numbers and finances, right? But they have opinions, which is great. So it'd be good to identify people. If there are people like we heard here tonight that have specific ideas related to numbers, are willing to go through to identify those people to bring forward and participate in a strategic numbers session. right? Because you've got people that are pretty close to the problems and issues and have some specific ideas.
Confidentiality with guardrails, maybe. Right? Think about that.
Thank you all for your input. I appreciate it.
Good.
Thanks, yeah.
Okay, so next is board discussion, and Russ, I'm gonna let you take the finance work group proposal. Lay it on out there.
Okay, yeah, so so there were two things that I had that we talked about, including in board discussions, but the main thing to start with was the proposal that I am proposing to the board to sponsor a finance work group, which would be tasked with fact finding of our, the list. I think I presented or I gave you a list of some questions to get started with. You should have that. So answering questions surrounding how did we get here, and several other, what our staffing levels are compared to typical school model, compared to our neighboring districts, and a number of questions that are intended to help point us in the direction of, so how do we next move towards a solution? So I'm proposing this group. Mary had mentioned she didn't really want to restart the district budget committee for this year, and I agree with that, because I think it was too cumbersome, and we actually didn't get anywhere. And I'm proposing this as a smaller, nimble group that would just be focused on finding the facts and developing some more questions to study, in addition to the ones that I had brought or that had written down on this list. But finding a list of facts and then presenting those back to the board, and then those facts then be used to help shape the next steps in how we go about the collaborative process of working towards solutions. So my thought was to include 2 board members, core admin staff, probably 1 secondary, 1 elementary principal, probably 1 person from each union, and then bring in other expertise as needed. I think, a person like Ian could bring in his expertise on special programs, so that as we answer our questions, we have 10, let's say 10 special programs that are funded by silos, that if we cut them, we just lose the funding. And we have these 4 programs that have some flexibility, so that we can both identify which areas we can't reasonably cut and which ones we can. So that's the basics of the proposal that I'm presenting.
How quick of a turnaround are you hoping for this to be? And maybe you said that, and I missed it, but.
Yeah, I'm open to what you think, but I'd like to get it done. I think we could get it done in 4 to 6 weeks, I'm hoping. I mean, I don't think that it's, Brian has done a fair amount of the work already. And so I think we're we partway there. So I think it, we need to do it in the fairly near future, so that we can get the rest of the process going. But we need to be talking from a common set of facts, and we have to have numbers attached to the facts.
I think that the questions here are the types of questions that need to get asked strategically to help address where we're going in terms of correcting the budget and the finances. And if possible, it'd be nice to share this with the community so that they know what we're thinking.
Yeah.
And what direction we're looking, rather than not know, right? So I think that would be helpful of where, just where we're looking at. And but it does feel like this is the right thing to do, the right direction to go. And it's the right strategic.
So one other thing I forgot to mention, I was going to mention is I don't want to step on the toes of bargaining.
I know.
So
Yeah.
we have to, for legal purposes, keep the bargaining aspects out of this
Right.
process. Some of there's overlap and
Yes.
I recognize that, but we have to be very clear, and having admin on this team will help us keep that.
Share as much as you can without overstepping the boundary of that. And there's certainly a version of this that could be shared.
And I would envision the product of the work group to then be presented to the board as a public document.
Right. And again, we're just trying to build up trust with people that we're working on this problem, and I think that would help. That would help with that.
Yeah,
But-
and
Go
finding
ahead.
people that within this group of who would participate, and finding who would be the best to answer those questions, and then probably coming up with more questions from what we hear at the public presentations too. So that will
Mhm.
also kind of steer the conversation, so.
Great.
So what are you thinking, like, meetings in the district office, or, and then
Yeah, it's
We can all be here,
I see
so-
it as a in-house process for the district between the in the district office. I don't. This process is more technical in nature, certainly, than our community meetings. I think we don't want to get going down rabbit holes. We want to stick to some pretty clear lines of facts.
do you want to shoot for starting like at the beginning of December, or, I mean, I know with
No,
the-
November.
in
I don't-
November?
Yeah, I think we should organize. I'd like to have the board decide how, if we have 2 members of the board, so who we should have. Should it be the same 2? Should we do rotating? How you want to do that, and appoint that. I mean, ideally, I'd like to appoint that now, and then they work with admin to schedule it, but sooner than later, because the longer we wait, there's just too much other collaborative work that we saw what happened last year when we put off that collaboration part of it, and to the point where there was no time left for it. And so I want to avoid that now. The decisions that we have to make are probably more wrenching than we had to do last year, or potentially. And so I think that we need to get this going as soon as we can.
Okay, so what are the best days for everybody, like?
Who
I
wants
mean,
to do it?
Yeah, who wants to do it? I guess that's the question.
I'm happy to volunteer. It'd be great if more people volunteered as well, but.
Yeah, I think I probably should be part of it, assuming I'm reelected because of my background with the district finance and being able to, delve into these questions. But I'm just that I would offer that at least.
Yeah, and I do it too. If we're doing 2 and 2, that you could have 2 groups, and then maybe on the next one we can switch if that felt right, or so.
If we do that though, somehow that information
Yeah.
needs to get transferred. I'm a
That's
little.
my concern
Yeah.
too.
Concerned.
2 and 2 feels a little bit like there's gonna be a lot of,
Well, then
I mean,
yeah,
I-
need to do it.
I'm not gonna do it,
But
but.
I'm actually
Y'all
out of
love me
town
on
a lot in
numbers.
the next few weeks, so that might not work best for me. So maybe that's fine too. I mean,
I think Ed and
I
Russ.
don't know,
are
you got a pretty
strong
big
choices.
binder over there.
But in terms of thinking about drilling in on budget, I think that you two are strong in those areas, and would lead that charge.
Okay.
I don't know how to frame it, and I'm worried it's in the weeds too much. Ross, these questions, it feels like there's something missing. I can't fully articulate it. If I come up with it, I'll let you know later, but it's along the lines of how our expenditures or our budgets are aligned to our values, like our strategic plan and our goals towards educating students, right? Like where is our spending and how is it in alignment with the work and the mission that we're trying to do? I feel like I don't want that piece to be lost as we're.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. And I think that's why I tried to write these down so we'd have a starting point. And then as you're able to kind of articulate that, we add it to the list. And then I fully expect each one of the other members that were able to get involved in the team to bring additional questions. And also that I see that this would be a group that would be searching out other expertise and bringing it in to add to that. So it wouldn't be designed to exclude those questions, but to try to flesh them out. But we need to make sure that what we're answering are the questions that will carry us forward.
I think what you're saying is kind of the underlying theme in everything that we're doing, and that's important.
Right.
I mean, that's why we're here.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
it's good. Can get lost.
And it may be that our immediate questions need to be more focused here, and that over the long term, we develop a system for tracking how well are the strategic plan values that we've outlined as a district and said we're trying to accomplish these things. How do our dollars and our spending align to those? Are we spending the majority in the places that we said is most important? Are we making cuts to the places that are most important?
Right.
Or are we distributing it, or, right? So just thinking about those values, and we've already identified those values in the strategic plan. And so it's a big ask.
Yeah.
And I know that, so.
Yeah, another way to think of it, Danielle, is the strategic plan is already one of the facts we've gathered.
Yes.
So these are our additional facts that some we've gathered, some we haven't, and trying to coalesce them all into one point.
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so Ed and Russ, you guys will work on coordinating those meetings, and then you'll report back to the board at later dates.
Well, I think each board meeting, I think we should give an update.
Perfect.
So this, Brenna, this is something you've mentioned before, the consideration that we we do some, so, board committees, and I can see this more as a committee where we would, each board meeting, we would report back to the board and then take the board's feedback to help guide us in our next series of meetings.
Okay, sounds great. Did you have something you were gonna say, Annie?
I think I was just thinking about being thoughtful of, we're asking folks who are already pretty spread thin to take on another group and committee. And so I do think that it's important that we're thoughtful about their time. We're thoughtful about like it being really focused and that it is a like kind of time bound and limited project. And it's probably going to need to be considered during working hours because those of y'all that were teaching today, I'm sure are pretty tired right now. So I think also just I feel protective of people's time. So yeah, it's just an important thing to remember.
That's a good point.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so next for the board discussion, building administrative support. That was, you put that on there.
Yeah, I did too, and I wanted to preface that by I think Brian did a excellent presentation on the cost savings we've been able to do to date this year, and that's primarily the assistant principal position. The board had directed the superintendent to cover that position without an additional hire. We received a recommendation back from Mary that did not meet the directive from the board. So I thought I would. So I wanted to ask you. So which direction should we go from here? And I'm actually thinking that this is another one where we may be, because it's personnel related and it's technical in nature. I think this is another one where we may want to appoint another committee of 2 people to carry it forward with administration on behalf of the board, rather than another process. And so I'm throwing that out there for you to think about how are we going to solve this issue in a way that we can all live with the solution.
Okay, so we're not talking about the solution, we're talking about the process to find the solution.
Yeah,
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I understand where you're coming from with the idea of like, okay, well, if then we need to kind of come up with some sort of answer. So it would be helpful if it wasn't just us coming up with some sort of answer, because we all know none of us are in the actual jobs. And I think that this position has not been fully filled for a while. And so I think that like, let's have a planning session or whatever, I think is potentially going to be very disheartening for a lot of people unless we're really clear on like how quick the turnaround is going to be and how focused it's going to be. Like we'll like kind of wait and we'll make some decisions over the next month. I think that's too long. And I think that our buildings have waited long enough.
So you're suggesting 2 board members kind of drive a resolution to this?
Yeah, my thought is I think the board is pretty united on this. And I think that the 2 board members could represent us just as well as all 5. And I think the reason why I propose this, because I think it's tough collaboration, but it's collaboration. I do not want the board to just issue an edict without having that heart-to-heart discussion.
Okay.
Yep.
Who are the other players that you're thinking the board would be or the two members would be working with.
I-
Do you have an idea of that?
I didn't get that far in my thinking. I mean, I thought that's why I wanted to present it to you and see what you thought of the idea. And then amongst the five of us decide who wants to do it. Or who we want to appoint.
Nominate Danielle.
I'd be happy to do that as long as I've got someone with me.
I mean, we all know I want to, but we all know my schedule right now.
Fair.
Not available.
I can do it. You and I do it too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Okay.
So that would be, see, Danielle and Brenna.
Yes.
Great, very good.
All right. Meeting schedule. So our next board meeting is November 9th at 6 p.m. Can we just do, so with the dates of the public presentations, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th, I am only available on the 13th. Can I take one of those slots and then the rest of you guys fill those?
I'm only available on the 13th as well, so if I could snag the other spot at Acme.
Is that okay with everyone?
Sure.
Okay, so November 13th at Acme is Brenna and Annie. And then
I'm looking at the other dates.
it's like, so that's like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? 13th, 14th, 15th.
The 15th was at Harmony.
I
Correct.
believe so, yep.
I'll take that one.
Okay. I'll take one the 14th. Kendall.
14th. And then Russ, looks like you can choose to go both 14th and 15th or.
Yeah, I could do both if that's, if there wasn't anyone else. So who else is Kendall?
I am.
Ed?
What time is it again?
5:30.
And then who else was gonna do Harmony?
Me. And Danielle's gonna do Harmony.
Danielle. Okay, great.
Sounds great.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we get that covered and that's good.
Okay, so now we have one personnel issue in executive session, no decision to be made. The only problem is, Russ, we don't know how we're gonna get you. We may have to stop the computer and then just call and do like a phone.
Yeah, does anybody have a laptop?
Ed does.
I do.
Because we could do that. I could
Send Ed a Zoom.
I could send you a Zoom link
Okay,
to Ed.
Worst case,
he doesn't have a
FaceTime.
fancy phone though.
Yeah,
He only has a flip phone.
He had a nicer phone.
I have Cindy's phone. Is
Oh,
yours,
that's, you got your wife's phone, okay.
is yours an Apple product?
it is an Apple product.
Let's
Okay.
try this.
All right, well, no decision to be made, and I would say executive session is 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So
I'm
let's,
leaving it. There we go.
so while you're signing, I'll send a Zoom link to Ed.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for
Thank you,
coming.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.